Hello everybody, my name is Paul. Welcome back to the Noon News. Obviously tonight's subject is the man of the hour, President Zelensky, as well as a multitude of other updates coming in from around the globe and in the country of Ukraine. There's a ton of this happened over the last 48 hours as we have gone through and looked at all of our sources, and let me tell you, it has been a very interesting evening. I apologize for the delay in the start. I did start with at least my research, and I cover a lot of the Ukraine stuff about an hour late as I wanted to watch the address live there at the Capitol, and we will cover the big updates regarding today and over the last 48 hours as we normally do. And of course, a lot of this stuff, generally speaking, is kind of abysmal in its topic. Generally speaking, that is what makes the news. And as unfortunate as that is, it does not mean that you as a viewer cannot help. There is a ton of people in the world. It's the largest crisis when it comes to internally displaced people and refugees in human history at 345 million people in the words of the World Food Program's director, marching toward starvation. And that is the situation in places such as Ukraine for its civilians there, as well as places like Ethiopia, Somalia, and parts of Southeast Asia and South America, and many, many more. So please, if you can, help us become the news that gives back. The thing here on the channel is we're never monetizing this for personal gain. We're never doing any kind of super chats. We're never going to be doing anything quite like that, no merchandising. The whole purpose of this channel is to inform you as the viewer as to what's happening in the world around you in the most unbiased apolitical way we physically can, with exceptions when we clearly state them. And also to allow to try and put some good back into the world and allow you to give back to the very people that are affected by these situations. And the way you're able to do that right now is through the video description. If you go down into the video description, you check it out, you're going to see a ton of different links down there. The multitude of them are all donation links. All of these have been vetted by us to make sure that they are credible individuals and organizations to ensure that your money is going where it's supposed to be going. The second thing that we vet in these, many of which have actually been submitted by you guys, and please keep those coming, we want to always add more, is the fact that most of these 80% or more go directly to the programs. It's one of our requirements. And so 80% or more of the donations that they receive go directly to helping people, and with 20% or less, emphasis on the or less, going to actually going to pay for those salaries and administration's costs, is stuff that usually makes a lot of organizations controversial, which is why you may see several organizations which are prominent but may not be listed with us. And so a ton of stuff obviously happening. A lot of this has to deal with conflicts, anti-terrorism measures, and what have you. And feel free, if you are a little lost or you have questions about something, please feel free, if you're joining us live tonight, to please ask questions. There's a ton of stuff to cover, and I am an expert in some of this stuff, a lot of the pressing matters. And so please, I will read through everything that is sent in on the live chat, and I will address them as I can. To give you a little bit of a background on myself, for those that may be new here on the channel, I was in the Marine Corps between 2016 and 2020. I was a corporal in an 0352 anti-tank missileman, and I did 2 tours to the Middle East with 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines. My first tour to the Middle East between October of 2017 and March of 2018, I was there in the country of Syria for 4.5 months, where I provided my expertise to Operation Inherent Resolve in supporting Special Operations Forces and coalition partners, including the SDF, against the fight against the Islamic State there in the northeastern part of Syria, as well as stabilization efforts throughout the region. I also spent about a month and a half in transit and training in the country of Kuwait. My second deployment to the Middle East, I was once again with 2-7, and I was attached to Easy Company, providing crisis response company out of Kuwait, where I spent the majority of my time between October of 2019 and March of 2020. During that time, I was one of the 100 Marines that responded to the Baghdad embassy crisis on New Year's of 2020, and there I provided I was in charge of the Javelin teams, and I oversaw all anti-armor operations over the Baghdad embassy complex as a whole, being there for events such as the assassination of General Qassam al-Soleimani. After that, I rotated to Saudi Arabia, where I provided training to Saudi Arabian Marines preparing to deploy to the country of Yemen as part of the Saudi coalition. I'm a subject matter expert in anti-armor warfare and armored doctrine. I'm also a fully cross-trained rifleman, a fully cross-trained machine gunner. I am a partially cross-trained radio operator. I am also a CLS, or Combat Lifesaver Certified Marine, meaning I've received additional extensive medical training in order to assist Navy corpsmen in their medical tasks. On top of that, I try to remain well-rounded, and I do have interests in other topics, though I claim not to be an expert in any of them, including geopolitics, history, as well as a multitude of other different topics that I just find interesting. But no matter if I am a subject matter expert or not, I implore the viewer, regardless, to please do your own research. And if you have any questions or you want a beginning point, every single map that we have here on the stream is publicly available to you guys and has been archived since we have started the stream, going all the way back into March and April. So please feel free to go and check all of those out. They are available on the website, which is listed into the description below. You can also find a wide variety of information. You can also chat with other knowledgeable individuals, including individuals from Ukraine and members of our staff. They're on our Discord, also linked in the description below. It's a wonderful community, and we have topic areas for everyone and everywhere, covering every single region in the world and having their own section. So please feel free to check it out, and I would love to see you join in on that community. And so with that, we begin our night, of course, in Ukraine as we move here into the news. And with the big topics coming out of the country, we start off here with the capital of Kyiv, where a large amount of information has to be coming out. And luckily today, the vast majority of the stuff coming out of Kyiv is some good stuff. But before we get too far into this, and before I forget, as I normally do, we do have an update from a viewer regarding Army Commander Conscriptovich, an ongoing joke here on the channel. And for those that may be new here, we do say, yes, we try to remain unbiased in many ways or apolitical, but in the words of Elie Wiesel, indifference is the most terrible thing you can possibly imagine. Indifference is exactly what causes situations like the Holocaust. And so here on the channel, we also cannot remain indifferent. When it comes to the country of Ukraine, we maintain a bias for the country of Ukraine and for the democratic values which it holds, regardless of some internal issues. And so that is our stance here on the channel, very clearly being stated. I hope that you guys can forgive us for that if you may disagree. But from Army Commander Conscriptovich here, coming from Nikitor, quote, we're doing so well that Zelensky has fled to his master in the U.S. Russia has obviously won this military operation. Coming from Army Commander Conscriptovich, originally coming to us as Private Conscriptovich, but battlefield casualties have certainly done a number on them. And so we move in here and we begin in the country of Kyiv, where there's been an innovative approach during the energy crisis. As you may know, Ukraine has been struck many times over at this point in regards to their critical civilian energy infrastructure. Russia has launched massive swarm attacks using both ballistic and cruise missiles, as well as Shahed 131 and 136 drones, which have ended up striking different regions of the country and striking at that critical civilian infrastructure. Upwards of 50% of the country was actually out of power for a time. And so it's very interesting to see some of the innovations that have coming out from Ukraine. Very resilient people, as we have seen time and time again. And power of the power of the people is now being used to power Christmas trees, as creative displays allows any passerby to power up the tree. Take a look. Using an electric generating bicycle to power Christmas trees there in Kyiv. Ukrainian Air Force is very eager for the Patriot missile batteries. That is happening. We do know that is coming. The Patriot missile battery, which has been talked about for some time now, something that the United States is willing to provide, is something that has been requested for a long period of time. And there's been a lot of speculation, a lot of talking, and we were very confident that this was going to happen, but the confirmation did come out today. The Ukrainian Air Force is very eager to get this into action. It, along with the IRST, will be two of the most modern, most capable air defense systems in the world that is being used by the Ukrainian army and the Ukrainian armed forces. And so the Patriot is going to provide amazing, effective anti-aircraft fires. It is a defensive weapon, so the United States and its partners are saying that this is not an escalatory step, as it cannot be used offensively. But this is going to be much more accurate and reliable compared to the S-300s, which are widely in use, as well as a magnitude of other types of former Soviet and Russian systems and usage there in Ukraine. So we can take a look here. This is coming from the Ukrainian Air Force. And the new Patriot missile battery will be a critical asset to defend the Ukrainian people against Russia's barbaric attacks on the Ukraine's critical infrastructure, coming from the White House during a briefing. Unfortunately, though, we do have bitter and dark news coming from Kyiv tonight as we get yet another child casualty update, a somber thing we report on here on the channel. And, quote, since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, 450 Ukrainian children have died, 863 children have been injured. Most victims among children are from the Donetsk region. Moreover, 332 Ukrainian children were reported missing, end quote. And that's coming from the Prosecutor General's Office of Ukraine. Unfortunately, that number has continued to steadily climb with every single report regarding it from the Prosecutor General's office, and we are expecting that to continue to climb further as the war drags on. As we jump down here and into the starting to move our way into the Donbass, we move over here first into the Kharkiv Oblast, over to the city of Izium. As you may remember, if you have been watching the channel for some time, a large mass grave was found in the city of Izium, which was under Russian occupation for a duration of time, several months. And unfortunately, when it was deoccupied, Ukrainian investigators did go through. These are Ukrainians which were killed under Russian occupation. 290 of the 451 Ukrainian victims found in the mass grave have so far been identified. Many of them were very far in their deteriorated states and were unable to be identified so far, or even identified in their gender. And so this is coming from law enforcement officers. They've managed to establish the personal data on 290 of those victims so far, and that work does continue. Over here in the Luhansk Oblast, we've seen offensives continue, and that offensive has made some headway. We've gotten some recent reports from Sergei Haida, who is the head of the Luhansk Regional Military Administration, regarding their counterattack into that oblast as they're working their way on retaking it. Now, for some time, we've been talking about the fact that, they are saying that they were close to Kreminna, and that Kreminna was within artillery range, but we never could get an accurate reading as to just how close they were. Well, thanks to Sergei Haida today, we do have a little bit better understanding, and we have been able to adjust the map accordingly. And we can take a look here from Sergei Haida himself on his official Twitter page. We can see just how close they are to Kreminna. Kreminna was the first major city taken by Russian forces during the onset, the very first 24 hours of the Donbass campaign many months ago. And we can see that those gains are quickly being whittled down. The Ministry of Defense for the United Kingdom even mentioning today that over 54% of the initial gains made by the Russian Federation since the start of the invasion on February the 24th have been rolled back, with only 18% of Ukrainian territory still under Russian occupation. We can see under here Kreminna being underlined, and we can see Dubova, which we have worked our way around right there. Still under occupation, but very close to liberation there, as it is a frontline city now. It's not the only thing we can see. Heavy fighting has been ongoing in those very thick woodlands just to the southeast of Kreminna, and we can see some forces here in the Luhansk Oblast just outside Kreminna as they're conducting one of their patrols here in that forest. Take a look. And you can see just the toll it has taken on every single inch of Ukraine seems to have been affected in some way, shape, or form. Even here, where obviously the shelling has been a little bit lighter, you can see trees completely splintered apart as artillery shells have come and busted them out. We move further south and we move into the Donetsk Oblast, where we get our daily Donetsk update from Pavel Krylenko, who's the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration. And he said, quote, on December 20th, number of victims of the Russian army in Donetsk Oblast increased by 4 killed, 8 injured. And that comes out from his official report coming out at 8 a.m. local time this morning. He posts this in both Ukrainian and in English for anyone tracking his channel. Pardon me. And since the beginning of the full-scale invasion on February the 24th, so far, 1,275 Ukrainian civilians have been killed in the Donetsk region, with an additional 2,770 having been injured. This does not include occupied areas of the Donetsk region, including Volnovakha, Donetsk, and Mariupol. Bakhmut has seen several big developments over the last 48 hours, and mostly yesterday, where we had quite a bit of news. But it would seem that, as I said not but a few nights ago, you can't cancel Christmas. And for Ukrainians, that is very much true. This is an elderly couple still living in the city of Bakhmut, a city completely destroyed by Russian bombardments happening multiple times a day and indiscriminately shelling. But it would seem that that's not going to stop them. Christmas goes on, and we can see them here as they bring back a small little bit of a tree to make a small Christmas tree in what they're using as an ad hoc bomb shelter in the ruins of the city. Fortunately, civilians do still live in the city of Bakhmut. It's a city originally populated by over 70,000 people before the beginning of the war, now reduced to a very small fraction of that civilian population-wise. 20,000 troops clash along a sector of the front line with 30,000 Russian forces, both of which engaged in brutal trench warfare, with victories measured in not kilometers or miles, but mere inches, feet, and meters. That is the fact of the matter, and we've seen successes on the part of the Ukrainian forces of further pushing out Russian forces from away from the outskirts of the city over the last 48 hours. However, those successes have not been solidified. Russian forces being pushed back to the E40 highway, where they are setting up stable positions, as unfortunately the terrain, due to the Rasputitsa and due to the heavy shelling, which has turned up all of that very soft, thick mud, has made it very difficult for vehicles and armored personnel carriers and what have you to properly maneuver and provide gunfire support for infantry forces, as they are conducting wave assaults on heavily defended Ukrainian trench lines. Zelensky did end up visiting Bakhmut yesterday. He's been a very busy man, and this is the top headline from yesterday, is President Zelensky visited the frontline city while it's been under shelling. This is the most kinetic, this is the most dangerous, bloody part of the entire war. And this 23-mile stretch running north-south, President Zelensky was here in the heavily embattled city as Ukrainian forces were pushing Russian troops out. He met with them there, and he presented awards for gallantry, of course, but he also was there to get a lay of the land and get a first-hand understanding as to what is happening there on the ground and what the difficulties are. Reinforcements were reportedly entering into the area around Bakhmut from the Ukrainian side to bolster the defense in this area and along other parts of the front. And there, he also met with several commanders, including a commander from a HIMARS unit, which he actually gave back his award and requested that it be presented to President Biden during his trip, as well as a written letter that he was presenting to the president along with it, and thanking the president for the HIMARS system, which has proved a very crucial role in this war. He was a captain of one of the batteries operating in the vicinity of the city. On top of that, Ukrainian forces also presented Zelensky with a Ukrainian flag signed by members of the platoon to be presented to the U.S. Congress during his visit to D.C. We have our first bit coming from Ilya Ponomarenko, who is a reporter with the Kiev Independent, who took some of these photos. We can see here, this is the flag that was presented to him, which was presented to Congress not but a couple hours ago. And so we can see that being presented to President Zelensky here, having been signed by the whole platoon. From Alexei Reznikov.
Шановні присутні, шановні панове офіцери, військові, наші герої. Маю честь бути сьогодні тут. Хочу привітати вас, подякувати, кращих нагородити і дещо попросити. Перш за все, хочу вас привітати, особливо тих, у кого є діточки. Вчора був День Святого Миколая. Вважаю, що ваше сонце – це наші діти, сяяли саме для вас, щоб вони вас мотивували обов'язково вижити і захищати ваші сім'ї, наші сім'ї, всю нашу державу, і це значить майбутнє ваших дітей. Я хочу вам подякувати за те, що ви зберегли найголовніше – землю, бажання жити, Україну, наш прапор, наші кольори. Ви абсолютно героїчні люди. Я хочу вам сказати, тут на Донбасі ви захищаєте всю Україну. Тому що після Донбасу вони все це зроблять і на інших містечках, в інших містечках нашої держави, бо вони не хочуть нічого українського. Я впевнений в цьому 100%. І тому на ваших плечах захист не Донбасу, а захист всієї України. Я вам бажаю тільки міцності, з якою ви зараз живете і перемагаєте. Збережіть, будь ласка, і стійкість свою, бо історія пам'ятає тільки переможців, тільки сильних і сміливих. Я вам цього відкрито, від серця, від душі бажаю. Мотивуйте, хто поруч, хто слабкіший буває. Особливо є мобілізовані, молоді люди. Зрозуміло, це важко, але бережіть свою міцність.
President Zelensky there in the city of Bakhmut, heavily embattled. As news of Zelensky's visit started to come out, Yevgeny Prigozhin, who is the head of the Wagner Group, he's the founder of the Russian private military corporation, which is currently spearheading the assault on Bakhmut, actually posted a video from the Bakhmut front lines pretending to give his artillerymen coordinates to say hello to Zelensky. They never did, ended up firing anything during that duration as they were afraid of counter battery fire, using it as a propaganda statement.
Никаких эмоций. Заехали кругрою, здорово. Ты можешь морзяночкой отбить? Владимир Александрович, мы здесь, в Зеленском. А то он в Бахмуте, говорят, да? Хотел переговорить никак.
Понял, сделаем.
Ага.
Расчет внимания. Осколочный, полный. Прицел 680.
Подолбили.
So, obviously, nothing ended up happening. In fact, they were actually driven back. The heavy fighting does continue around the city of Bakhmut and around the rest of the areas to the north and southern flanks. Russian forces are currently trying to attempt to encircle the city. And with that heavy fighting, the Russian troops, once again, as I stated before, did end up retreating deeper into their lines. And unfortunately, it was a very costly endeavor. Reportedly, Ukrainian forces and Russian forces engaged in close combat at some points in hand-to-hand as trench lines were changing time and time again as they were both going back and forth between the forces. They changed hands several times before ultimately Ukrainian forces were victorious, but not before both sides withstood very significant casualties.
Братан, по нам ***ало, прямо по нам, прямо по нам. Ззаді йде, залізь назад. По льошці у... Да. Мужики цілі, там дерево кинули. Мужики живі, все. Блять, сука! Падіть на землю і не вставайте! Красава, нахуй.
These are individuals from the 24th Brigade, which are in the vicinity of Bakhmut. Fortunately, it appears it does have some copyright music. But you can see here, obviously, heavy fighting on both sides. Or heavy artillery usage is what dominates this. This war, especially in this area, is much more resemblant of World War I style warfare, fighting between two trench lines across no man's land, trying to outmaneuver each other despite being both heavily dug in. We even see the Wagner Group conducting wave attacks, which have led to horrific results, with just entire fields strewn with Russian troops having been killed rushing against a Ukrainian 50 cal machine gun position. The Siniat factory on Lumumbi Street in eastern Bakhmut, an adjacent residential neighborhood. The area and factory, including nearby sparkling winery, has been hotly contested in recent weeks. It's just 2 kilometers from Bakhmut's center. This is some of the fighting that was taking place as Ukrainian forces were driving them out of the city.
Як виглядає східна частина Бахмута, її приватний сектор. Але я це показую не для того, щоб внести смуту у ваш мозок, а навпаки для того, щоб внести ясність про невідповідність ворожої пропаганди. Щоденно, метр за метром, сотні очей спостерігають за кожним квадратним метром так званої небезпечної потенційно до входу ворожих сил.
And you can see, and I think that this image over here illustrates it the best. Not a single building completely untouched in this city. Not a single house, not a single apartment, not a single business, factory. Doesn't matter. The whole thing has been reduced to rubble. We can see this emphasized more in some drone footage here of the city of Bakhmut. This is on the eastern sector of Bakhmut. And you can see the absolute disregard for discriminate fires. This is indiscriminate shelling and has completely destroyed every building in any vicinity near the front and has severely damaged everything else in the city itself. These will never be able to be livable again. If they have not been flattened as the houses here have been and reduced into nothing more than individual bricks, these buildings will have to be demolished and they will have to be rebuilt for anyone to return to the city of Bakhmut. This city has turned into yet another Mariupol without the besiege. And so that is the updates coming from the city of Bakhmut. We jump down here and into the city of Donetsk, where it would appear that Rogozin has had a blast at his party, quite literally. The ex-director general of Roscosmos, which is the Russian version of NASA, the Russian space agency, Dmitry Rogozin, has been wounded as a result of shelling at the Sheshbesh restaurant in Donetsk, where he celebrated his birthday, according to Baza. He received shrapnel wounds to his head, back, and butt. His bodyguard, however, was killed in the blast. That is the individual himself. And that is the damage from the inside of the building. We're going to go ahead and skip that video. There he is. Fair saying happy birthday. We jump over here and into the back lines. This is the city of Orkhynski, which is here near the Russian border. This has been under occupation since 2014, and you can see what Russian occupation does. I mean, you have to look no further, really, than Russia itself. Look at Siberia. Upwards of 25% of Russians don't even have properly running water, or electricity, for that matter, in many parts of the country, nor do they have improved roads, and many are subsistence farmers. But we can see here where that seems to be more of a mentality and cultural thing than anything else. This city is literally decayed. It has literally fell apart. And the only thing with any sort of repair work done to it happens to be, of course, a statue of Joseph Stalin, who perpetrated the Holodomor, which starved millions of Ukrainians and also instigated the No Step Backwards, which was instigated by the Soviet Union during World War II, where they en masse executed their own retreating forces in order to force the others to continue fighting, most famously during the Battle of Stalingrad, which is the bloodiest war in human history, with over 1 million people having been killed on both sides. You can see that here in the city of Zelensky. Once again, the only thing with any kind of state of repair is the, of course, statue of Joseph Stalin, the famous dictator who is so terrible they had to unname a city, also now currently known as Volgograd, used to be known as Stalingrad. And they had to unname a city and have a process of what was formerly called de-Stalinization, might I remind you. And you can see here, of course, the communist flag waving in the sun, or it would be if it wasn't cloudy. And you can see the city behind it. This small village turned really into ruin. The war hasn't touched this area for years. Coming up here into the city of Marinka. The city of Marinka is currently, while it is stated to be mostly under Ukrainian control, it is considered contested. This lies onto the southwestern part of the city of Donetsk, which serves as a huge, it's a huge center for administrations. It is what you would consider to be the head of the region, which is currently under occupation, has been under occupation for some time. The Russians use this as a logistical command hub. They use it as a command, control, and communications hub as well. And a large number of troops and equipment and supplies are located in the city of Donetsk before they are shipped out directly to the front lines. Not that that is far away, as the city of Marinka is putting additional pressure onto that, as well as Avdiivka to the north, which lies right here. Russian forces have been trying to push Ukrainian troops out of the south and currently trying to push Ukrainian forces out of Marinka, which has so far been unsuccessful and very brutal fighting similar to that around the city of Bakhmut. And we can see here some of that fighting coming out on video. Take a look.
Что? Следующий. Что?
Very heavy fighting ongoing there. We are expecting to see that continue for the next several weeks as that situation remains very fragile for both sides. And in Kharkov has seen a significant intensification in shelling over the last few weeks, and a few days ago was no exception. Here on the 20th of December, so yesterday, Russian rockets once again struck the city, damaging at least 2 multi-story apartment buildings and destroying 1 personal vehicle. Luckily, only 1 person was injured in the attack. Once again, coming from Pavel Krylenko, who had one of his staff members take these photos. Over here in the city of Kryvyi Rih, the search for victims just continue. The father is desperately digging for his daughter in the rubble after a rocket ended up hitting their home. The girl survived, but is in critical condition.
Все, моя Китя, сейчас. Выезжай мою водицу. Конечно, Мишка тут, дочь. Китя, все хорошо, дочь.
Давай, я тут буду освобождать.
Мы все живы, слава Богу.
Отойди, пожалуйста, я тебе на ногу не сиди.
This comes just a day after the funeral of an 18-month boy named Timofey, who and both of his parents, who died as a result of a rocket strike on their home. Russian forces continue to strike indiscriminately at all targets across Ukraine, both military and civilian, with no difference or no differentiation between the two. And according to Fair, who is our in-house translator, and she says that the little girl can be heard yelling, "Can you save my bear, mommy?" As we move into the rest of the international news, that actually does wrap up all of the news inside the country of Ukraine itself. But there's plenty of news, of course, outside of the country, and we will also get to Zelensky's visit towards the end of the episode in D.C. But we move over here and into the country of Russia, the aggressor country when it comes to the ongoing war. And it would appear that here in Trubchevsk, they're out of power right now. So a mystery drone reportedly struck the electrical substation there in the city. We can see here some of the results of that damage. And it is a border city. So it is relatively close to the Ukrainian border. It's unknown if this is the work of partisans or the Ukrainians, but obviously that substation was targeted. Up in Moscow, we have several different developments coming out. We have, of course, several different updates coming from the Kremlin. According to the Kremlin, thanks to Zelensky's visit to Washington today, there will be no chance for peace, meaning that Putin is intending to continue the war with no intention of entering into any kind of negotiations. It will have to be a military defeat. Putin said, quote, since civilian deaths are inevitable, better now than later. Once again, it was President Putin who is the one who instigated the war and also declared war on the country of Ukraine. Unofficially, of course, there was no official declaration of war, as in Russia, it is not considered a war, and it is actually illegal to say as such, as you are discrediting the armed forces, carrying a 15-year prison sentence that may be much more extensive under that regime. Instead, they must call it a special military operation. And if you do not believe me, just take a look for yourselves.
Действия, военные действия, это всегда связано с трагедией и с потерями людей. Это мы прекрасно понимаем, отдаем себе в этом отчет. Но поскольку это неизбежно, лучше сегодня, чем завтра. И я думаю, что все присутствующие в этом зале прекрасно понимают, о чем я говорю. Имея в виду и состояние наших вооруженных сил, и наличие у нас перспективных видов вооружения, техники, которые в других странах нет, а у нас есть. Это все создает определенный запас прочности. И он есть. Мы знаем свои преимущества. Ядерная триада, военно-космические силы, военно-морской флот в отдельных сегментах и так далее. Мы это все знаем, это у нас есть, и все это в нужном состоянии находится.
So he says that we have certain advantages. The nuclear triad doesn't really help in a conventional war. He says the Navy, they lost the Moskva, the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet, to a country that scuttled its own navy. It had no warships. They say it is in the right condition. Well, as we have seen from individuals who have posted on Telegram channels from Russia during conscription, they received rusted out AK-47s that hadn't been used ever. Maybe in Afghanistan. We've seen equipment that has been obsolete for decades being utilized here, including drone systems that were developed in the 1970s. Russian forces, they say that they have advanced weapon systems that provides them advantage, their precision. They are not. Most Russian cruise and ballistic missiles are accurate within 200 to 300 meters of their intended target, which is why they target a lot of power stations, because power stations, usually speaking, span about 200 to 300 meters, about 200 to 500. They're very large locations that are very difficult to miss, but they are long range. To give you an idea, the Ukrainian HIMARS system, as well as the NATO HIMARS system, has an accuracy to within 1 meter of its intended target, and it will put a telephone-sized rocket between me and my camera. That is the accuracy of NATO weapon systems. The weapon systems being used by Russia violate Article 1, Additional Protocol 1 of the 1949 Geneva Conventions, which was adopted in 1977. So far, they are using weapon systems knowing that their limitations far exceed the expectation and precision for weapon systems available at the time, and therefore they're using indiscriminate weapon systems in highly populated civilian concentrations of both civilian individuals and civilian infrastructure, making it a war crime, and systematically doing it under orders means that it is a crime against humanity.
Видим и то, что нам нужно сделать для совершенствования вооруженных сил, в том числе сухопутных войск, контрбатарейной борьбы, систем связи и так далее, и так далее. Все, находящиеся в этом зале, понимают, о чем я говорю, и уверен, вы с этим согласны. Но, что хочу подчеркнуть, у нас именно в России, и таких стран немного в мире, я уж не говорю про наших соседей, у них скоро вообще ничего не будет, все будет только в виде подачек, и деньгами, и вооружениями, и боеприпасами, только подачки. В России совсем все по-другому. У нас есть все, я хочу это подчеркнуть, именно все возможности для того, чтобы наращивать этот потенциал. И мы, безусловно, будем это делать без всяких скидок.
Russia has been heavily impacted by sanctions and has had to move to using dual-use equipment that is meant for Roscosmos prior to the sanctions in order to maintain any kind of stockpile and the usage of ballistic and cruise missile systems, as they have run out of all of their established stockpiles for the war in Ukraine, with only limited numbers now being held back, if any, for a fight against NATO should that ever break out. Russia has not been able to muster any kind of meaningful capabilities on the battlefield, digressing from the newest and most top-rated tanks in the Russian arsenal, including the T-72B3, the T-90, the T-80, currently fielding T-62 tanks, outdated by decades. Sergei Shoigu, who is the Minister of Defense of the Russian Armed Forces, said, quote, "The armed forces of the Russian Federation achieved the lowest mortality rate in the history of military medicine during the special military operation." Not true. He also proposed increasing the number of combat personnel in Russia's army embroiled in a Ukraine offensive to 1.5 million troops, as well as increasing the age limit for military service to allow for more people to be conscripted. Coming from TASS's official Telegram channel. You can see it there in Russian. We continue here. Quote, "Thank you for slaying the cannibals." While Zelensky visited and awarded the real heroes there in Bakhmut, Putin has summoned his sham ensemble to give them Order of Honor. In this video by Margarita Simonyan, who is the head of the Russian state-run news network RT, gets her award and gives a speech praising Putin's hunger for more blood.
Владимир Владимирович, много лет работаю под вашим руководством, всегда хотела вам сказать, мне кажется, сейчас самый подходящий момент сказать то, что я всегда хотела. Спасибо вам за то, что вы мочите людоедов. Вы нам обещали 20 с лишним лет назад, помните эту вашу фразу незабвенную, их мочить. Вы 20 лет назад не дали оторвать наш Кавказ, вы не дали разгореться кровавой бане межнациональной резни, которая у нас вообще-то уже почти разгорелась и была на волоске. Я это прекрасно помню, даже у нас на Кубани. Хотя, казалось бы, еще чуть-чуть и полыхнуло бы по всей стране, не только Чечня и Дагестан. Спасибо вам, что в 2008-м вы не отдали полоумному людоеду сажать Абхазию, сажать Осетию и Осетин. Спасибо вам, что совсем недавно вы прекратили бойню в Карабахе, несколько лет назад. И, конечно, вот я, в принципе, обычно не волнуюсь, выступая публично, но сейчас, каждый день, видя, что происходит в Донецке, невозможно не волноваться и не переживать. Спасибо вам, что вы с болью, с кровью, но вырываете из кровавой пасти этих людоедов наших людей, что вы решились на это. А мы будем в этом помогать, мочить людоедов столько, сколько вы от нас этого потребуете. Служу России. Спасибо.
For those that may not understand some of the context for that, she references Chechnya 20 years ago. Chechnya was Chechnya at the when the Russian Federation formed, two separate republics refused to sign the Federation. One of those is the Republic of Chechnya, and while the other was coerced through negotiation, Chechnya continued to refuse, and was brought back under the fold by force in two bloody wars that saw Grozny leveled and tens of thousands of civilians laying dead in the streets as a result. That is also where we first see the implementation of the filtration point system, which has been most closely resembled to a concentration camp system. Systematic beatings, rape, torture, and summary execution, as well as deprivation of sleep, life, liberty, as well as deprivation of food and water and basic medical assistance, all commonplace. In fact, the International Criminal Court actually was able to go through and actually persecute several individuals, including pro-Russian individuals there in Chechnya. So that occurred. In 2008, Russia invaded the country of Georgia under the guise that there was genocide being committed against Abkhazia, as well as in South Ossetia. Of course, the ethnic cleansing came when Russian and South Ossetian rebel forces, who were backed by Russian troops, moved into the region and began ethnically cleansing Georgians from the region. And the embassy of Finland was overrun with sledgehammers. Young men with sledgehammers swarmed the Finnish embassy and threw them over the embassy wall. Also, notice the guy on I believe it's the far left who's just not able to quite get it over the wall. Of course, this is in reference to several things, most notably Prigozhin, who as the head of the Wagner Group, after during a prisoner exchange with Russia, one of the members of the Wagner Group was exchanged as well. The Wagner Group executed him by beating him to death by crushing his head with a sledgehammer. Fake blood was then used on a sledgehammer and sent to Europe, where it was presented to them by Prigozhin. And so we move on to the rest of Europe, starting with Germany, where the German court has convicted a 97-year-old ex-secretary from a Nazi camp. The German court on Tuesday convicted a 97-year-old woman for being an accessory to murder for her role as a secretary to the SS commander of the Nazis' Stutthof concentration camp during World War II. She was alleged to have aided and abetted those in charge of the camp in the systematic killing and imprisoned of those imprisoned there between June 1943 and April 1945 in her function as the stenographer and the typist in the camp's commandant's office. While there are very few left, there are unfortunately still Nazis who were able to escape Nuremberg walking free, and those are continued to be hunted by devoted groups of individuals who continue to try and hunt them down and seek justice for the over 6 million people who were killed during the course of the Holocaust, most notably the Jewish individuals, as well as individuals also considered to be undesirable, including ethnic minorities, including the Poles, who were the first to be invaded by Nazi Germany, and also homosexuals and people of the LGBTQ community, and individuals who had physical and mental disabilities. We jump down here into Syria, where as we begin to move into the Middle East, where we see that 3 civilians were injured during a missile strike. The forces of the international coalition, led by the United States this afternoon, launched a missile attack on a residential building in the city of Al-Bab, Aleppo province, where one of the leaders of the Islamic State of Yemeni origin was allegedly hiding, but it is not known as to whether he died, as there are rumors that the blow was currently unsuccessful. Only 3 civilians were injured, according to initial battle damage assessments. That could possibly be a Hellfire missile, but I am not entirely sure. I did end up missing a point, however, and that would be up here in Iceland, and I apologize to Europe for that. But Iceland ended up donating winter gear to Ukraine. Iceland donated 12,000 pieces of warm clothing to the armed forces of Ukraine. Socks, sweaters, hats, mittens, and more. Things are mostly civilian, since Iceland does not have its own army, with the exception of Special Forces Detachment and Coast Guard, with a combined strength of 250 people. So fantastic to see Iceland pitching in there as well. Back in Syria, coming into the eastern part of Syria, the United States Central Command conducted 3 raids in eastern Syria. The U.S. Central Command announced the arrest of 6 Islamic State militants in Syria. Among the detainees of the counterterrorism operation was the field commander, who was responsible for organizing terrorist attacks in the region. In just 2 days, the Americans carried out 3 counterterrorism operations within the northeastern part of the country. Coming from the United States Central Command, over the past 48 hours, U.S. Central Command forces conducted 3 helicopter raids in eastern Syria, resulting in the detention of 6 ISIS operatives, including al-Zabadi, an Islamic State Syria province senior official involved in the planning and facilitation of ISIS attacks in Syria. Extensive planning went into these operations to ensure their successful execution. Initial assessments indicated no civilians were killed or injured. These partnered operations reaffirm CENTCOM's steadfast commitment to the region and enduring the defeat of ISIS. Since, according to General Michael Eric Kurilla, the CENTCOM commander, the capture of these ISIS operatives will disrupt the terrorist organization's ability to further plot and carry out destabilizing attacks. Once again, coming from the official statement from the United States Central Command as of yesterday. In the country of Iran, protests do continue at this point. Anti-government protests are only growing worse as protests and popular demonstrations continue, and they are currently demanding the authorities stop the practice of executing detained revolutionaries at this point, which many are currently facing the death penalty as a result of participation in the protests, and that does not include those which were killed during suppression efforts of these protests. As we continue to the east here, Afghanistan, a new development has come out, though one that was very heavily expected from the Taliban. Females can no longer receive a higher education. In Afghanistan, the Taliban have banned girls from attending universities. Secondary education for girls is also banned in the country. This is coming from an official Taliban statement. They are slowly but surely implementing their pre-war ideologies. So this is under Sharia law for them, and it is a very heavily focused on men, obviously. Afghanistan, when prior to the U.S. invasion in 2001 and 2002, following 9/11, the Taliban did control Afghanistan, except for the northern region, which was under the Northern Alliance. One of the main figures of that was Ahmed al-Massoud, who his son is currently fighting the Taliban as well. And they heavily suppressed and really restricted any rights of women in the country. And they stated initially that they had been changed, that they no longer wished to do that when they initially took over the country again last year. That seems to have been, of course, false, as can be expected. And they are slowly implementing these back into action. They're slowly implementing these policies once again in order not to slowly but surely, as they are trying not to raise too many alarm bells and trying not to cut connections with other countries they're hoping to build a relationship with. Two actions related to the bans on girls attending universities have been recorded. In Jalalabad, a number of male students in the medical faculty of the Nangarhar University, in solidarity with their compatriots, said they were refusing to participate in the exams. Professor Ubadallah Wardak, lecturer at the Faculty of Mathematics in Kabul University, ended up resigning. Military preparations by the Taliban have been seen in Kabul, Mazar-e-Sharif, Maimena, due to fears of possible protests. Militants on vehicles are stationed at major intersections. Particular attention is paid to the areas around universities themselves. An unfortunate update from Monday. We do have an update on the tunnel explosion and Salong Tunnel. They are currently investigating the circumstances of a tanker truck with fuel there in the Salong Tunnel. The incident occurred on December the 18th, which connects the province of Parvan and Baghlan. The explosion killed about 100 people, is what the death toll is to now, with an additional 120 being injured. According to one version, the attack was a terrorist attack on the tunnel. An IED was allegedly attached to the bottom of the truck. Representatives of the Taliban movement have not yet commented on this version of the attack. Taliban noted that the investigation is still ongoing. So as you can see, these vehicles just absolutely burned to a crisp while they were trapped there in the tunnel. Coming out of Banu, pretrial detention center was taken over by TTP militants. The TTP standing for Tehreek al-Taliban Pakistan, the Pakistani Taliban essentially. An operation is underway to free hostages from a pretrial detention center in the city of Banu. The assault began with the destruction of the main entrance to the building and with a controlled explosion. Special forces broke into the facility and started a firefight with Tehreek al-Taliban Pakistan militants. The authorities claim that the operation is over. 33 terrorists have been eliminated and all hostages have been released, not injured. During the assault, only 7 police officers were injured. The Pakistani Ministry of Defense says the assault is still ongoing. This is confirmed by video recordings that eyewitnesses have published so far online.
Mobile din apre na usi girlande.
لا سوقاتنا قبل يلي ولا جاي جدلي ولا جاي لا مراي مراي ويو خپل ما وسره لګای کړی دا خو خپل کا ځان یو سره
So that is the situation there in Bakhmut, Pakistan. In Japan, Japan has plans to create long-range missiles for their submarines. Japan is planning to modify the Type 12 missile, increasing its range from 200 kilometers to 1,200 kilometers. An improved version will be created within a few years. The submarines will be equipped with vertical launch systems. At the moment, not a single Japanese submarine can boast of this, but the renovations are expected to be part of the program. A total of 21 submarines are currently in service. In addition to the Type 12 upgrade, Japan wants Raytheon's American Tomahawk cruise missiles. The launch range of up to 1,600 kilometers. Japan wants to buy 500 total units. This comes as Japan has increased its defense spending from going from a very small amount, so just there's Japanese self-defense force, to increase. They are now have passed a legislature to increase that to the NATO standard of 2% of their GDP, effectively doubling defense spending for the country of Japan, and the largest military spending budget since World War II for the pacifist nation. We'll start off in the western United States. We'll travel across the Pacific today, where a magnitude 6.4 earthquake ended up hitting Northern California. A powerful magnitude 6.4 earthquake rocked the northern coast of California before dawn today, crumbling homes and roads, rupturing utility lines, and leaving thousands of residents without running water and electricity. At least a dozen people have been injured, with 2 others having been killed from medical emergencies that occurred during or after the quake. The tremor, which struck at 2:30 this morning Pacific Standard Time, 5:30 this morning Eastern Time, was followed by about 80 separate aftershocks, which was centered about 215 miles or 350 kilometers north of San Francisco, offshore of the Humboldt County. See some of the damage here coming from California. Obviously, major destruction to a lot of these buildings. This region does lie along the San Andreas fault line. Fair says, never experienced an earthquake. I have. When I lived in California, I was lucky or unfortunate enough to get to experience an earthquake. It is if you could, they happen very often, but you don't usually feel them. But they are kind of weird. It's a very weird feeling, especially, I've never been in a strong one. I have been in several in my lifetime. There are ancient fault lines, this is what they call them, that run underneath Indiana and the Midwest and throughout the Ohio River Valley area where I live. And that is, generally speaking, they have ancient fault lines. So we get small earthquakes every once in a while. I was always asleep for them as a child. When I lived in California, there was one that was very close to where I lived. It wasn't very strong, but you could definitely feel it. And you just kind of feel like, if you've ever floated on the water in like a small boat or something, that's kind of what it feels like. It's very fluid. You're just kind of rocking back and forth. Or if you've been in the pool for a really long time, like several hours at a time, and then you get out of the pool and you feel like you're still kind of floating in the pool when you're standing on land, that's kind of what it feels like. Unless it's a really strong one like this, I don't know what that feels like. I'm sure it's much more terrifying, but it's a very weird sensation if you've never felt it by personal experience. Now, everyone, I'm sure, could describe it a little bit differently, but that is generally speaking kind of the feeling I got when I was there. And everything kind of shakes a little bit, may knock some pictures down, that kind of thing. It's kind of weird though. Come over here into Washington, D.C., and we see here, coming from the White House, a new $1.85 billion USD for an aid package. A total of $1.85 billion currently headed to Ukraine in the latest security aid package. This was announced while President Zelensky was on his way to the country. Coming from Alexei Reznikov, he gives who says thank you. This is thank you for the military aid package. Is not a Christmas present. These are what is necessary to work on holidays and weekends, during the day and night, in the snow, rain, and heat. The struggle for life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, thanks to the President and Secretary of Defense and the American people. And coming from the White House and from the U.S. Department of Defense themselves, we can see that aid package announcement. This is the immediate release. And we can see one Patriot air defense battery with its munitions, additional ammunition for the HIMARS systems, 500 precision-guided 155mm rounds, meaning the Excalibur round, 10 120mm mortar systems with 10,000 rounds of munitions. Those are big boys. We have them in Syria. 10 82mm mortar systems. Those are the Soviet standard, and those are also very large, very similar to our 81mm mortar systems. 10 additional 60mm mortars, great for squad level tactics. This would outfit so the 10 82mm mortars and the 10 60mm mortars would outfit about a infantry battalion sized unit, so a relatively large unit in total. 37 Cougar mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicles, or MRAPs, 120 high-mobility multi-purpose wheeled vehicles, or Humvees, 6 armored utility trucks, high-speed anti-radiation missiles, precision aerial munitions, over 2,700 grenade launchers and small arms, Claymore anti-personnel munitions, demolitions munitions and equipment, night vision devices and optics, tactical secure communication systems, and body armor and other field equipment. They will also be providing Ukraine with 45,000 rounds of 152mm artillery, 20,000 rounds of 122mm artillery rounds, 50,000 122mm Katyusha Grad rockets, 100,000 rounds of 125mm tank ammunition, satellite communications terminals and services, as well as miscellaneous funding for training, maintenance, and sustainment of all of that equipment and what they already have, and possibly including future equipment as well. Quite an extensive amount of assistance so far. $21.2 billion having been provided to Ukraine since February the 24th. But the highlight of the night, as everyone has been expecting, as I am sure, is the fact that President Zelensky, for the very first time, visited Washington, or not for the first time, but the first time since the war began, has publicly left the country of Ukraine and flew to Washington, D.C. not less than 24 hours after being at the front line in Bakhmut. He's been a very busy man. I envy his stamina to keep going, as it was a very big question as he was preparing to present his speech to the Capitol building, which he presented a speech at the Capitol to a joint session of Congress, and he did it in English. The entire speech is in English. It was highly televised. Unfortunately, I do not have any clips of the speech itself, as I could not find a source that wasn't copyrighted. I apologize to everybody. But very good. I watched it live. I saw someone asking about that. I did watch it live. I dropped everything that we were doing. It's one of the reasons why I was late. I did not want to miss that. It's a very historic moment for everybody. But he was in Ukraine, he went to Bakhmut, he went there, presented awards, oversaw the situation, immediately drove back, got on an airplane, flew across the world, landed in DC, had a full day of events, and then gave one of the most monumental speeches in the 21st century to a joint session of Congress, and is now flying back to Ukraine to continue dealing with the war effort. I have no idea how this man keeps going the way he does, but I really hope he gets some rest on his flight home. President Zelensky, once again, for the first time, he met with President Biden about 2 p.m. or this afternoon is when he arrived at the White House. He did end up landing just about an hour earlier, and he was staying at the guest residence. He went to the White House officially about 2 p.m. He held about a 2-hour meeting with both the president and his security council behind closed doors. And there they discussed situations regarding the ongoing war, necessities, things that they were hoping to get, and kind of working on that relationship a little bit and what can be provided and the reasonability. Stuff that you may not just be able to get over a phone call. And at roughly 7:35 this evening, Eastern Standard Time, he addressed a joint session of Congress at the Capitol building. During his speech, it was compared very widely by the public to the speech provided by Winston Churchill almost exactly 81 years ago. Churchill underwent a secret voyage from the United Kingdom under the massive U-boat threat during the very prominent years of the Battle of the Atlantic, and he made that secret voyage, arrived there in Washington, and provided a speech to Congress, a joint session, almost 81 years ago, the day after Christmas. So we're off only by a few days. He spoke at length regarding the fight against Russian forces, of course, as that is the topic. He touched on the trials and tribulations that his country has faced, and he reflected, on moments over the past year of issues that they have come across. He spoke at length regarding the devastating effects of Bakhmut, a city he had visited less than 24 hours prior. And he also thanked Congress, the Biden administration, and honestly every American on the support that everyone has given him, something that it was expected as well. And of course, you're very much welcome with any support we can give and will continue to give. And emphasizing that these efforts were not charity, however. He specifically said, these are not charity. These are investments in global peace and security for future generations. And he reminded Congress that he had not requested American forces to fight in Ukraine for Ukrainian troops could fight on their own or for their own nation. But he also stated that while they could just as easily fight for their own country, they could just as easily operate American tanks and aircraft if they were provided to them. Joking with Congress a little bit about how, yes, they have given a lot of artillery, but to be honest, it's not enough. And, of course, it was made a good chuckle during the joint session. And he's underlying his request for heavier equipment. We've seen these pressing more and more and more. He always needs more for the war. He emphasized their victories and the victories the United States and Ukraine shared jointly, along with the free world, and as this is a fight that he stated was between democracy and autocracy. And ending his speech by stating, quote, standing here today, I recall the words of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, which are, I think, just so good for this moment. Quote, the American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory. The Ukrainian people will win too. Absolutely. End quote. After which he presented a flag, the same flag that I showed here, not just but a few minutes ago, to Congress. He presented the flag to Congress as a gift from the troops there in Bakhmut, signed by the entirety of the platoon that is fighting there and the very brutal battlefields there in Ukraine. He was also presented the flag, the U.S. flag, folded and encased, that was flown over the Capitol building today in order to take home with him.
President.
Hello.
Good to see you. Who are you advising? Well, Mr. President, it's good to have you back. I'm delighted you're able to make the trip to be here, and it's an honor to be by your side in the united defense against what is a brutal, brutal war being waged by Putin. 300 days. Hard to believe. 300 days.
He is the captain of Heimer's battery. Yes, he's very brave, and he said, give it to very brave president. And I want to give you that is the cross for military merit. That is one.
Oh, God love you.
Yes, that is from him.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. What a great honor.
Thank you.
Now we have a few more people in there.
Work for us. And really, that probably is air defense. Italy, for example, SAMT, the name, they have it, an energy network.
Coming from President Zelensky's official Twitter. Here from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine. Of course, a beautiful photo captured between the two presidents. Of course, after his joint speech to Congress, he once again met with Nancy Pelosi, who earlier this year went and actually visited President Zelensky in the country of Ukraine. Always fantastic to see. From the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, you can see things have changed before and after the war at this point. And of course, tonight's thumbnail photo. Very beautiful picture. And of course, you see, of course, you have George Washington, you have Abraham Lincoln, you have Hamilton, you have FDR. Very beautiful photo, I think. It really encompasses quite... you start to notice something that's very special about this when you think about what all of these individuals throughout history and currently sitting in this picture have done at this point and really left their mark on history. From the President of the United States, Joe Biden's official Twitter as well, says, welcome back to the United States. And here is him getting off of the aircraft. He's met with military and civilian political delegations. And of course, with his own ambassador to the United States. So, wonderful to see. It's pretty awesome. Now, there's been a lot of talk right now. And a couple of things that is underscored that has some tones to it with this is why now? Well, it's a very... It syncs up very well in history. It syncs up very well, like I said, 81 years ago, on December the 26th, Churchill came to the United States in secrecy and addressed a joint session of Congress under very, very similar circumstances. You're talking the United States has, the United States is at war, and the United Kingdom has been at war. They have just fought the Battle of Britain. They are, the entirety of Europe is under, Nazi control, and the world is, now in a world war, and it is a very perilous situation. The United States has not yet fully mobilized, and the situation is very fragile. But it's a monumental point. The United States is now entering the war, and are finally getting into the conflict. and they are able to start to muster and start to plan and put things together and able to figure out, how are we going to work together going forward as we look into this next chapter of the war. Whereas for the majority, it was a Europe problem here until not too long ago. This is a new chapter in the war for Ukraine, and there's a huge bill that's currently going through Congress, $45 billion in additional aid. They're trying to get air defense systems. They got the Patriot system that they had been talking about, there's calls from all sides to start providing things like tanks, the M1 Abrams, for instance, the M2, M3 Bradley, also providing, the aircraft as well, F-16s, NATO aircraft, moving away from the Soviet aircraft, and a lot of other, of course, issues that they're dealing with that probably isn't something that they're willing to disclose, but it's something important to talk about. He said during an interview with several other media companies while in Ukraine, he said, when asked, will you visit the United States? He said, yes, I will, but I'm waiting for the critical time to do so. And so obviously this must be a very critical time for President Zelensky and for Ukraine and for the war to go there, and also a very symbolic period of time. And we can see some obviously very good things coming out of that. The standing ovation he received at the beginning of his speech lasted much longer than just when I thought that they were all going to stop and sit down. They just kept going, and he was interrupted constantly throughout his speech by standing ovations. It was very, very well received. It appeared to have been very well received by both sides in Congress, and it was a very, very warm welcome, and it was very well delivered. There were concerns, as I stated, that prior to him giving his speech, he was going to be extremely tired. He has jet lag. He has been going and going and going and going. He was in Bakhmut. He immediately got on a plane, flew to the United States, had an entire day full here in the United States, and was immediately flying back to go back to the war effort, and had to give a speech in English, which is not obviously his native tongue, and so English can be very difficult for him. He delivered his entire speech in English, and it was very, very well done as a speech. It was very impressive. 100%. If you have the opportunity, I highly recommend you go and actually listen to the speech itself. It is in English for you, and it is very, very well done. I think it will go down in history. That is for sure. And something that we've seen touched on too is there's some discontent, especially growing in certain parties in the United States, of fatigue, should we say, of providing so much money to Ukraine. The support, at least openly for Ukraine is there, but giving them additional funds, it may not be, and for the war effort. And that is something that he was trying to address during this visit, as that is happening. And so that was an important thing to address, and that is the question, especially as you're looking at an additional $45 billion. As well as something else that I see people have already talked about, and in the live chat here, is his clothing. And some people were criticizing him for not showing up in his suit and tie to the White House, and I saw several good counterpoints to it so far during the research as we were kind of looking for stuff and people commenting and talking about it. And what was stated is, you're providing billions of dollars for a defense budget. Would you rather the guy show up in his fatigues that he is always in anyway, as he is a commander-in-chief in a war zone and has just come back from the front lines less than 24 hours ago, or would you rather he show up in the nicest, fanciest, most expensive suit he could get? And that certainly, I think, shows here, and he spent the whole day in his fatigues. So definitely, I think, something worth noting. I don't believe that is something worth even commenting about. As we continue here, we wrap up the night finally with our last bit coming from the United Kingdom tonight. And we go over here and to Bristol, where there has been a development. A baby's heart defect was successfully treated with injected stem cells. A baby born with a heart defect was the first person on record to receive an injection of stem cells to patch his heart after surgery. Congenital heart defects are the most common type of birth defect, affecting about 1% of children born in the United States and the same percentage in the United Kingdom. Baby Finley was born with a birth defect called transposition of the great arteries, meaning two major arteries meant to carry blood out of the heart had switched positions. Finley underwent open heart surgery 4 days after birth to have the arteries move back to their normal positions. Complications arose after the 12-hour procedure as Finley's heart function worsened. After weeks of intensive care, Dr. Massimo Caputo, a professor of congenital heart surgery at Bristol's medical school, offered Finley's parents another option to consider: an injection of stem cells delivered directly into the heart. Caputo had been developing a stem cell plaster or patches containing donated stem cells that can be sewn into the heart during surgery. Unlike standard synthetic patches or replacement heart valves, in theory, these patches won't need to be replaced every so often as the child gets bigger. The plasters could help reduce or eliminate the need for children to undergo repeat open heart surgeries. Within 2 weeks of the injection of the stem cells, changes were already being noticed in little Finley. We can see here the stem cell patches that they are talking about. So pretty awesome to see. Pretty awesome, amazing advance in development. And so hopefully we can see where more of that kind of stuff, where more of we see that stem cell research is really moving in leaps and bounds right now. Really a wide variety of opportunities growing out of that. They're growing complete replacement organs, which could be used to reduce the waiting for organ donation for people that are in immediate need of vital organs that need to be replaced and other things. So it's pretty awesome to see. So very interesting indeed. But that is everything in the news tonight across the globe over the past 48 hours. That is the top stories. A lot of stuff happening. Obviously a lot of big developments, of obviously very monumental ones throughout the world right now. If you can, please be sure to help us be the news that gives back by, jumping down into that video description below and, and giving at least a little bit to one of the wonderful organizations there. Once again, 80% of the donations that they receive go directly to their programs. And if you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, that's okay too. You can always help out the channel and help us grow, because by growing, it increases the impact that we'll have as a community on people's lives throughout the world by giving us that like and subscribe and sharing if you would like to. So if you want to join in on the community, we do have a Discord. It's also linked in the description. And if you would like to get access to this map, it's also on our website. Linked in the description is below too. Hoping to see all of you guys. Hey Rob, what's up, man? But I hope to see everyone here back once again on Friday night for another 48 hours of news and review. I do recommend, and I will make announcements here on the Discord and here on YouTube, as well as anywhere else that we are posting. We are expecting some severe weather to come through our area, and I know a lot of you also live in these areas too. Please be safe. The weather is expected to be severe, and if we cannot end up, if it is too bad and there's concerns with stream stability or what have you, I will make announcements for any postponements or cancellations for the nights going forward. But if you are caught in the wonderful weather that is rolling through the middle of the United States right now, please be safe and stay warm. I hope that you guys, and I hope that all of you remain safe and warm, and I hope that you, your family, and your friends are safe, and if not, I do hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. Once again, my name is Paul from the New News, and have a fantastic rest of your night, everybody. Bye now.
Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до повноваги і чудно клич. сатани. Тисячі вже полягло, і все більше шлекуємо, то для них нема нічого, крім труни. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стрія до волновахи, і чутно кличе, діти нахуй, тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО.
Вызволять пришел, братишка, ну привет. На моей земле тебе один ответ. Нашим людям с кирпичом, даже танки и бачок, вам не взять нас и за 100 тысяч лет.
Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стрія до волновахи, і чутно кличе, діти нахуй, тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО.
Mr. Putin, on behalf of all our guys, no one's scared of your nuclear device. You can take your double lemon, shove it up your wrinkle bum. Oh, we'll come and help you fit it in your skull.
Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стрія до волновахи, і чутно кличе, діти нахуй, тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стрія до волновахи, і чутно кличе, діти нахуй, тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стрія до волновахи, і чутно кличе, діти нахуй, тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стрія до волновахи, і чутно кличе, діти нахуй, тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Ідіть нахуй!